Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ignition News. It is January 8th, 2026. There is a dark cloud which hangs over Minnesota and indeed the entire country. It is reminiscent, of course, of other times, eras, and situations in the American history and the American story when a single gunshot, in this case 3 gunshots, changed the course of the history of the nation. And without knowing where we are going next and how we will get there, I think every American with a conscience woke up today, January 8th, feeling like a different version of an American citizen today than they did yesterday. I know that I did as well. Welcome, everyone, to the Ignition News. If I'm being very honest with you, I'm not sure that I wanted to record a show this morning. The news is very heavy, and it carries with it the heavy uncertainty of the future of not only American democracy, but about the relationship between the people of this country and our government. It seems that we are on the verge or precipice of a great shift in the American consciousness, as we all saw with our very own eyes what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Typically, on the Ignition News, we cover 6 stories and bring them together to a close about how they are related. Today in America, there is only one story, Minneapolis. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ignition News. Please consider sharing out the show. If you're watching live on TikTok or Instagram, please consider sharing with your friends. And of course, the show is both broadcast live on Spotify, TikTok, and Instagram, and then published on Spotify and your favorite podcast platform. It means a lot when you go find the show and you follow the show. It helps us to do the work that we're doing. Today's show is sponsored, of course, by Ignite, fighting fascism in the age of its rise. Let's get into it, everyone. It's Wednesday, is it Wednesday? What is it? Wednesday, Thursday? It's Thursday, January 8th. Just 24 hours ago, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent shot and killed 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good in South Minneapolis. What happens next tells you everything you need to know about where the country is going right now. Today's show isn't about one story told from multiple angles, because what happened yesterday on Portland Avenue in Minneapolis isn't just about one woman being killed by a federal agent. It's about the competing narratives from the federal government. It's about institutional collapse and a government that within hours of killing an American city called it an act of domestic terrorism before any investigation began. We're going to walk through exactly what happened, who Renee Good was, how the federal government responded, why DHS officials are privately shocked by their own agency's action, what's happening in Minneapolis today, and what this means going forward to the degree that we know at all. For the sake of history and obviously today's news, at approximately 9:30 a.m. in Minneapolis, Minnesota, ICE agents conducting an enforcement operation in South Minneapolis encountered Renee Nicole Good in her red Honda Pilot on Portland Avenue East between East 33rd and 34th Streets. Multiple witness accounts and videos from different angles show exactly what happened. ICE agents in 2 vehicles, a Nissan Titan and a Chevrolet Suburban, approached Good's vehicle, which was blocking the road. Witnesses say she was using her vehicle to observe ICE activity, not to target anyone for arrest. We now have a new video from a home security camera that not only proves that this is the case, but concretely proves that she was posing no imminent threat to the ICE agents. One ICE agent approached the driver's side door, grabbed the handle, and ordered her to get out of the car. He said, "Get out of your car, get out of the fucking car." The agent can be heard yelling this on video. Good's vehicle backed up slightly and then began to pull forward. A third ICE agent approaching from the opposite direction drew his weapon with one hand and fired multiple shots. Witnesses report 4 to 5 shots, although on camera we can concretely see 3, directly at Good through the windshield. The Honda then crashed into parked cars a short distance down the road. Renee Nicole Good was shot in the head. Renee Nicole Good died instantly. Multiple witnesses, including a neighbor named Betsy who spoke to ABC News, described what happened next. A man approached the crashed vehicle and identified himself as a physician. He urged federal agents to help stop the bleeding. Video shows federal agents preventing him from providing immediate medical care. According to witnesses, there was a significant delay before ICE agents approached to render aid. When Minneapolis police arrived and began to administer care, it was, of course, too late. Renee Nicole Good was pronounced dead on January 7th at the hospital. Minnesota Police Chief Brian O'Hara stated clearly, there is no evidence that Good was the target of any law enforcement investigation or action. She was a U.S. citizen. She lived blocks from where she was killed. She was 37 years old a mother of three, a poet, and by all accounts was observing legally ICE activity, which is a protected First Amendment activity. Everyone is talking about what happened. Everyone is talking about what ICE engaged in and how that went down. I want to spend a bit of time on today's show talking about who Renee Nicole Good was. So, Renee Nicole Macklin Good was born in Colorado. She was 37 years old. She had 3 children, ages 15, ages 12, and ages 6. She recently moved to Minneapolis with her partner and her youngest son. Her mother, Donna Ganger, told the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, Renee was one of the kindest people I've ever known. She was extremely compassionate. She's taken care of people all of her life. She was loving, forgiving, and affectionate. She was an amazing human being. Good described herself on social media as a poet, a writer, a wife, and a mom. She studied creative writing at Old Dominion University in Virginia and won a prize in 2020 for one of her works. Her ex-husband said she was a devoted Christian who participated in youth mission trips to Northern Ireland when she was younger. She loved to sing, participate in chorus in high school, and she studied vocal performance in college. According to everyone who knew her, she was not an activist. She had never participated in protests of any kind. She had no criminal record beyond a traffic ticket. She was simply a person who, on the morning of January 7th, decided to observe what was happening in her own neighborhood when 2,000 federal agents descended on Minneapolis. Her vehicle had Missouri license plates because it was registered at an address in Kansas City, Missouri. It's not clear why, but that detail became part of the federal government's narrative about her somehow being suspicious. Welcome, everyone, to the Ignition News. It is January 8th. We are reporting today, obviously, on the imminent news of the day in the nation, typically on the Ignition News, which we broadcast live on TikTok, Spotify, Instagram. We cover 6 to 7 stories, and we wrap it all together. However, in America today, there is just one story. An American woman legally observing the conduct of ICE in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was gunned down. Here's what we know about the government's response. Welcome, everybody. Let's continue to the next story. Within hours of the shooting, before any investigation, before any forensic analysis, and before any formal review, the Department of Homeland Security issued a statement calling the incident an act of domestic terrorism. DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin claimed Good weaponized her vehicle, attempting to run over our law enforcement in an attempt to kill them. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem held a press conference that same day. She said Good had been, quote, stalking and impeding officers throughout the day, and that the ICE agent used his training to save his own life and that of his colleagues. She went further to say the same ICE agent had been attacked before and dragged by a, quote, anti-ICE rioter who rammed him with a car in June and sustained injuries. Noem said, and I quote, it was, quote, an act of domestic terrorism. President Trump released a statement saying Good viciously ran over the ICE officer, sharing a video that does not show an ICE officer being run over. And Vice President J.D. Vance said on social media, you can accept that this woman's death is a tragedy while acknowledging it's a tragedy of her own making. Vance added, I want every ICE officer to know that their president, vice president, and the entire administration stands behind them. Obviously, this all happened with no formal investigation, no review, just an immediate, coordinated narrative from the federal government calling a dead American citizen a domestic terrorist. Good morning, everyone. I don't have a ton of commentary to provide on this right now. Welcome. If you're new to the show, this is the Ignition News. Typically, as I said, we cover 6 or 7 stories about what's happening in the country right now, but there's a great deal of uncertainty. So let's continue about what the video actually shows. If you're on the Ignition News, we have verified through multiple sources, and we've conducted our own sort of case, frame by frame analysis of the video. I want to tell you what I've actually seen on the video. Multiple video angles directly contradict the federal government's response. Obviously, we heard Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey yesterday said in his press conference, having seen the video myself, I want to tell everybody directly that it is bullshit. He continued, this was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in someone getting killed. What I can tell you is the narrative that this was just done in self-defense is garbage. It's not true. It is not the truth. We also know from multiple eyewitnesses, which described the exact same sequence of events. We have Trevor Heitkamp, a Minneapolis resident who recorded the video. He told CNN that Good's vehicle was turned mostly sideways to the road, that the car backed up slowly and proceeded to pull forward pretty slowly. He said, then the agent who fired the weapon was on the opposite side of the car to me, and I heard 4, possibly 5 shots. And then the car sped forward because the person injured and their foot went down. Another witness told ABC, I could tell that nobody was in a state of shock. I really felt scared by what was happening and what kind of state of terror and fear I was in. Now, the ICE training manual specifically states that deadly force is only warranted if the subject poses an imminent threat of serious injury or death. Flight of a vehicle does not typically constitute deadly force. ICE officers are trained to approach vehicles by forming what is known as tactical L to avoid being in front of the vehicle and to prevent injury. In other words, it was the ICE officer's duty and job to put himself in the safest possible position, which he clearly did not do. And we know that now because internal agents at DHS are telling us this. Our next story on the Ignition News is about the response from inside the Department of Homeland Security. We've received multiple reports from the Department of Homeland Security that officials are privately shocked over how the department's immediate response to the fatal shooting contradicted the narrative of what actually happened. They described it as a break from precedent that generally points to an investigation before reaching a firm conclusion. Multiple and current federal Homeland Security officials initially questioned the officer's conduct, though they stressed that the preceding events remain unclear. One ICE veteran told CNN, I don't recognize my former agency. This is truly heartbreaking. What we're seeing here is a disconnect between DHS officials who actually understand use of force and Kristi Noem, ICE Barbie, telling the American people something quite untrue. The fact that internal DHS officials are privately shocked by their own agency's response tells you how abnormal this situation actually is. Even people inside the system, this disgusting system, recognize this violated every standard protocol for how law enforcement agencies are supposed to handle officer-involved shootings. Now, what I think is perhaps the most imminent danger, the most perhaps real threat to the truth is as follows. Our next story, the investigation that isn't happening. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension initially announced it would conduct a joint investigation with the FBI into the use of force by the ICE agent. However, on Wednesday afternoon, the FBI informed the BCA that the U.S. Attorney's Office had reversed course and that it was removing BCA from the investigation. The BCA released a statement this morning saying, without complete access to the evidence, witnesses, and information collected, we cannot meet the investigative standards that Minnesota law and public demand. As a result, the BCA has reluctantly withdrawn from the investigation. They are telling us out loud, folks. They are telling us out loud what is happening. The state agency responsible for investigating police shootings in Minnesota has been excluded from the investigation because the federal government will not share evidence, witnesses, or information. And they are taking the extraordinary step of releasing a public statement to that effect. They are in no uncertain terms telling us the federal government may be actively involved in a cover-up. The FBI is now conducting this investigation alone. The same FBI that operates under the Department of Justice, which operates under the Trump administration, which within hours of the shooting called Renee Good a domestic terrorist. There will be no independent oversight. There will be no state participation. There will be no transparency. This is the most imminent threat to the entire situation. I'll step out of the show and hop into some commentary. As a former resident, I can't say fairly Minnesota, but I used to live in North Dakota. And one of the things about law enforcement in Minnesota, you all know how I feel about law enforcement, but there was some solace in knowing that perhaps we would have some information about what happened if the state's officials, which are among the top officials in the entire world, by the way, some commentary on this, by the way. A lot of people don't know, but Target is, well, a lot of people do know this. Target is actually headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. A lot of the law enforcement apparatus that operates in and around Minnesota are actually part of Target's internal loss prevention. Target has loss prevention and anti-crime efforts that quite honestly rival the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And they quite often not only train, teach, but provide that information to law enforcement. All this is to say, one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because centered and hubbed in Minneapolis, Minnesota are among, arguably, some of the best law enforcement and investigative brains in the entire country. The fact that the federal government is actively choosing to ignore what are unquestionably some of the best investigative minds in the country is deeply suspicious. I am deeply suspicious. Nonetheless, the reality of the situation. Here's what we know about what's happening in Minnesota. On Wednesday night, thousands of people gathered in vigils across Minneapolis. The intersection where Good was killed had become a memorial site, and there were signs that read, for example, "ICE not welcome." Remember, by Thursday morning, the memorial had grown to fill the entire block, and people have continued to add flowers and candles throughout the day. Protesters gathered outside the Whipple Federal Building, which houses regional ICE headquarters. There are reports of people throwing snowballs at police and ICE agents. Border Patrol agents are using pepper spray to disperse crowds. What is perhaps most alarming is that it appears at this time that most major social media is filtering, blocking, or preventing some of this information from getting out. We've received multiple reports of people trying to post videos of active and current protests that are quite literally being blocked from apps like Threads and TikTok. And the question that we have right now is, how are we to understand what's happening in this country if we are to trust these apps to give us this information? How does this all come together? The killing of Renee Good is not an isolated incident. This is at least the fifth person killed in connection with ICE enforcement. Here's what we know so far. On Christmas Eve in Maryland, ICE agents shot into a van, killing the driver and injuring a passenger. DHS said the driver weaponized his vehicle and began ramming his van into several ICE agents. Sounds like a familiar story. In September, an ICE agent killed Silverio Villegas Gonzalez in Chicago after claiming he was hit by the car and dragged a significant distance. In each case, DHS claims vehicles were used as weapons against agents. This is now a standard response. Vehicles as weapon, fear for life, offensive shooting. We've also learned that 32 people died in ICE custody in 2025 alone, and that December was the deadliest month in ICE custody in history. The context, obviously, of course, matters here. DHS announced Tuesday that they were launching the largest DHS operation in Minnesota history. They deployed 2,100 officers to Minneapolis-St. Paul, 1,500 enforcement, and 600 DHS investigations. This, of course, was following a viral video from Nick Shirley, which contained a ton of misinformation and disinformation. And ever since early December, ICE has arrested nearly 1,400 people in Minneapolis. Let's be clear about what happened here. The Department of Homeland Security deployed 2,000 federal agents to Minneapolis based on politically motivated allegations about daycare fraud. Those agents conducted enforcement operations without coordination from local law enforcement, and one of those agents killed an American citizen who was observing their activity. Within hours before any investigation, the federal government called her a domestic terrorist. Career DHS officials privately are shocked at how this happened. The FBI has taken over the investigation, and they are quite literally excluding local law enforcement from participating, seeing the evidence, seeing the witnesses, questioning people. And we don't know where this ICE agent is now, or if they're exfiltrating him from the state of Minnesota. This is what government by fear looks like. This is what happens when a federal agency operates without accountability. This is what happens. This is what happens when political appointees immediately defend the use of deadly force before anyone knows what actually happened. Renee Good was not breaking the law. She was not the target of any investigation. She is an American citizen legally observing federal law enforcement activity in her own neighborhood, and they shot her in the head for it. And the response, by the way, from the federal government, imagine how today might be if the federal government had said, a terrible accident is happening, we're looking into the details of what happened, we're trying to understand what happened, we don't have the answers right now, we're going to cooperate with the state of Minnesota, we're going to get you the information as soon as we can. We encourage everyone to remain calm. We encourage everyone to understand that this has been a terrible tragedy. No one wants to have the needless loss of life. If simply Kristi Noem had gotten on camera yesterday and said even half of what I just said, the tenor, the tension, and the tone of this country would be very different right now, but it's not. And there's only one reason that one can logically conclude that is. Number one, they know that what they did is murder. Number two, they believe that they can somehow convince us to lie and lie and lie and lie, and it will somehow change the narrative of what we saw with our own eyes. Believe what you saw with your own eyes. Believe what you heard with your own ears. This is a president who has engaged for the last 12 years in lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. And eventually what happens with his lies is he wears down our capacity and our ability to understand and believe or trust the truth. So many people woke up today. A good friend of mine woke up today, told me, she said, I'm having a difficult time believing the truth. Minneapolis, Minnesota is testing the endurance of our republic. That's not me that said that. That's Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. We are watching in real time what happens when federal law enforcement acts recklessly, without cooperation, without accountability, and without transparency. This is why ICE is trying to make it illegal to film their operations. And make no mistake, they are trying to make it illegal to film ICE officers, claiming that it is interfering with their operations. Now we know why. We saw with our own eyes why they don't want us to be able to record them. And now we also know that in nearly every ICE-involved killing in the country, the story has been the same. The ICE agent says they were placed in imminent threat by a vehicle from the person that they killed. They have developed what seems to be a playbook. They have developed a playbook to wipe away accountability. Renee Good died on camera and shattered their playbook. Now we know, and now we must reasonably question what happened in every other one of these incidents. It is not only logical to ask these questions, it is essential to ask these questions. This happened less than 1 mile away from where George Floyd was murdered, which sparked a summer of incredibly dramatic protests where we asked open questions about what should happen with law enforcement in the United States of America. We learned no lessons. And because we learned no lessons, we now find ourselves right back literally in the same neighborhood, having to confront the brutal reality again. Minneapolis is on edge. The country is on edge. Everyone is watching what this government will do in the next few days. Pay attention. I will tell you what I don't think enough people are telling you right now, but I have been consistent over the last year. You must document. You must record. You must take evidence. You must take note. You must witness what is happening in this country. You must witness what is happening, document what is happening, and record the actions of this administration. We all deserve a government that doesn't call citizens terrorists for following the law, for exercising your constitutional rights. On Rebel Radio, our host network, we witness. We teach people to witness. It's been a core philosophy of our strategy of trying to save this American republic, of trying to make this place better. When we see evil, we witness evil. When we see evil, we document evil. When we see lies, we boldly claim that they are lies. Don't hide from a lie. Don't allow the lie. Publicly condemn the lie. Ask questions. Demand answers. It's not acceptable that the BCA was removed from this investigation. Why? What are they hiding? This pattern is familiar. January 6th, the Secret Service deleted text messages. Do you remember this? The Secret Service deletes their text messages. Why? Why is the FBI refusing to cooperate with BCA? Why is Kristi Noem so quick to call this woman a terrorist? Where is the leadership in this country right now? Where is the leadership in this country? As I said, on the Ignition News, we typically cover 6 to 7 stories which are not on the surface connected, and then we draw in all of those stories together with one single line. Today in America, there is one story. An ICE agent killed a woman in cold blood, shot her in the head, and then the head of that department lied about it on national television. And we are asked to believe these lies and pretend that we did not see with our own eyes what actually happened. And we will not be silent. That's why we do the Ignition News. That's why we choose to report the facts as they are, not as they wish it to be, not as they tell us what to say. And disgustingly, in America, There are some agencies, some news agencies, who are bending themselves in pretzels right now to try to invent a version of the story that softens the terror of the lies coming from this administration, that gently cushions it as a story about a tragedy. This is not a tragedy of Renee Good's own making. Renee Good did nothing that you might find yourself doing on any other normal day. How many of you have driven by red and blue flashing lights and asked yourself, what is happening right now? How many of you stopped or slowed down to make sure? How many of you now, when you see law enforcement in the United States of America, default and assume this must be ICE-related or could be ICE-related or might be ICE-related? They want you to keep driving. They want you to go away. They want you to be afraid of stopping. They want you to pretend that you do not see what is clearly happening in front of your own eyes. This is not a tragedy of the making of Renee Good. This is an atrocity of the making of the United States government, the purpose of which is pointless, founded on a lie from a 23-year-old YouTuber seeking only social media fame, casting aspersions on people, and we deserve better. There is only one story in the United States of America right now. It is what is happening on the streets of Minneapolis. Where the citizens of Minneapolis go, so goes the country. It will decide. It will decide the next course of this country. And because we don't have leaders that are willing to tell you this right now, or willing to be bold and courageous, I am deeply concerned for you, for your family, for your children, for the safety of your family, for the safety of yourself. The question when you watched what happened yesterday, so many people said to me, well, that could have been me. Well, that's the wrong take. If we don't do everything in our power to stop fascism, it will be you. You know the famous poem. In America, at first they came for the immigrants, and then they came for the trans people, and then they came for the leftists, and then they came for the white women in the street, just trying to prove that what was happening was actually happening. This has been January 8th edition of the Ignition News. Everyone, please stay safe, hug your family a little bit tighter, and we'll see you back tomorrow. Welcome to the Ignition News, your unfiltered, uncensored source for the actual truth in what is happening in the United States of America and around the world. We are not bought by the billionaires. We are here to be your source of truth in a time where truth matters more than it ever has. Be sure to follow along with your favorite platform on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Substack. Let's get busy with the truth. Welcome to the Ignition News. Let's ignite.